Just the other day on the Pomp Show, Bitcoin is superior to crypto in every way, according to Mark Moss. Now, while I love Bitcoin, and as you probably love Bitcoin as well, I have some issues with some of the ways that he characterizes Bitcoin as being superior. Let's go and see what he has to say, and let's get some additional thoughts on that. Here we go.
You talked about a swing back towards decentralization. What is the technology revolution that's going to change the course of humanity, and what is the impact on financial markets then?
Well, and this is a piece that I talked about at this event I was at this weekend, at George Gammon's event. Shout out to Rebel Capitalist. What people are missing, and Lynn Alden put out a quote last week, to equate Bitcoin and crypto shows you don't understand either.
Interesting.
And so I use that quote in my talk, and there's a technological revolution that's happening here, but most people are blinded to it because of the crypto boom and bust that's been happening. Mm-hmm. But there's actually a revolution that's happening. So for the first time ever, we've created digital scarcity.
Okay.
We've created true decentralization. We've
Pause right
been
there.
able to...
So Bitcoin, not crypto. So it says here, Bitcoin is fundamentally different from any other digital asset, highlighted. No other digital asset is likely to improve upon Bitcoin as a monetary good because Bitcoin is the most secure, decentralized, sound digital money, and any quote improvement will necessarily face trade-offs. Well, I do not agree with that. This was from Fidelity Digital Assets. Bitcoin's first, why investors need to consider Bitcoin separately from other digital assets. So, small issue, talking about digital assets means that you're not talking about crypto, because digital assets are centralized assets, whereas crypto assets are things that are cryptographically enshrined in the software so that they're secure. Digital assets, you can just willy-nilly just print them off just the way that the central bank does now. So it's interesting that this idea that Bitcoin is something that's separate from crypto, that somehow it's on this great, mountain in the sky and everything is below it, and that it's the most decentralized, the most secure, the most sound money. Now, on the sound money front, I have to agree, because when it comes to comparing it to what's in the space right now, as far as a sound money is concerned, nothing is really working in that way. So when it comes to being able to consider something along the lines of a sound money, and when we say sound money, that means that it's got a rhythm, it's consistent, it's got its own rules, and it's set so that we understand what the monetary policy is versus what's not sound money, which is the stuff we see today with, governments just printing it off like crazy whenever they want to. It's like, hey, I want to have a few $1 billion to send it off to Ukraine. Okay. And then off goes a few $1 billion. And when that happens, that's your money getting dwindled away down to nothing, right? They just inflated it. And now they've taken whatever you thought was $1 and now turned it into being worth, say, 80 cents overnight. That's not fair. So that's not sound money. But Bitcoin doesn't do that. Bitcoin has a set rules, so everybody's playing by the same rules. Nobody can just print off more if they want to. So secure, decentralized, it is, but there are others that are out there that maybe don't have the same kind of recognition Bitcoin has that are innovating the space. Bitcoin's been around the longest. Bitcoin's the king. I'm not disputing the king. However, I do have to take exception with the idea that we have to completely disregard all other crypto and just only look at Bitcoin. I understand if this is all about investing and that this is probably an easy way for them to understand things, but it's almost a parabolic narrative to have that kind of position, because that's almost like only a Ford car is a good car. Ignore the Ferraris, ignore the Lamborghinis, ignore, it's just Ford. And when I say Ford, it's because Ford was the first to come out with the Model T and the assembly line and all that great innovation that made it possible for the really, really awesome Lamborghinis and the Ferraris that blow the socks off of today's Ford, right? So that's what happens with technology. There's the first, but then there's the second mover advantage that's able to build on the technology from the past. So keep that in mind. Let's keep going.
Move into the information age without copying information, which is incredibly powerful. Now, what does that
Information
mean?
age without
We don't
copying
really know. When
information. Yes.
steel was invented, it gave us a new material that we could build skyscrapers and bridges with. It also gave us material we could build a space shuttle with, but we didn't know that when steel came out, right? When electricity came out, the first application was a candle. It was like a digital candle, but candles were light for 5,000 years.
It's just like what I said about Model Ts versus
Ferraris. It gave us the
Ferraris.
building block to do what we're doing right now. And so we have a new set of building blocks. We don't know exactly what we built off of that, but I think it's I would imagine you would agree, it's probably the best risk-adjusted investment that we could make right now if we're willing to wait.
So when you used the electricity example or the steel example,
I agree.
Those were building blocks, as you mentioned. And in hindsight, we know that, okay, yes, the first applications were interesting, but they were really small compared to what eventually was possible. Is the
I like the way they're talking about building blocks, by the way. I think that's
or like the innovation, the blockchain? Is it Bitcoin as an application of a blockchain? Like, how do you think through? Because I immediately jumped like, okay, what would the critics say of the Bitcoin only viewpoint? They're like, yes, of course, the blockchain is the innovation, and then we're going to go put all these different applications, and it's a building block and all that. How do you think through? Is it actually the blockchain, or is it the application of Bitcoin that ends up being the true innovation that serves as the foundation for whatever is to come?
I believe that the true innovation is decentralization.
Okay, interesting.
So how do we achieve decentralization?
That's
we achieve decentralization by, instead of having one database, we have multiple databases. In order to achieve that, everyone must be able to run a database.
Yep.
So with Bitcoin, anyone in a third world country with a 5-year-old laptop can download the database and run it. But you can't do that with any other of the other, whatever, 19,000 coins. And so the innovation is decentralization. And I believe there's only one that really gives us that.
Okay, pause right there. What? So the whatever 19,000 cryptocurrencies that are out there, you can't run a database on those other ones? Are you kidding me? Of course you can. What's this guy talking about? I don't even understand. Technologically speaking, I can run any of them. As a matter of fact, a lot of the cryptocurrencies that are out there, if you think about some of the older ones like Litecoin and Dogecoin and all these other ones, they were created out of a fork of Bitcoin originally. They changed the consensus and a few things, but generally speaking, they work pretty much the same, which means, yes, you can take your 5-year-old laptop like he talks about and be able to download it and be able to run a node just like anybody else. I don't understand what he's trying to say, saying you can't do that. That's just misinformation. That's what's going on here. He's not telling the truth. Maybe it's just to make a point, but it's not true. You can do that with other cryptocurrencies. Of the 19,000 or so that he talks about, I'd imagine a lot of that is just tokens on Ethereum. So yeah, you can run an Ethereum node, and there's like 18,000 of the 19,000 that he's talking about right there. So it's not that hard. So I don't know what he's talking about. Decentralization in terms of running databases in the blockchain world is sufficiently happening with all of them, pretty much. If I want to be able to run a database for, say, what's one of them out there? Cardano. I can run a node for Cardano and be able to have a copy of the Cardano database, the Cardano ledger, like he's talking about, just like everyone else. Now, it's not just a ledger that's keeping a monetary value of a coin. Bitcoin is just so you understand, when there's these other platforms out there that have smart contract capabilities where they're able to do applications and things like this, that just means that they have a general purpose where they can do different things like they talked about. Bitcoin is effectively a blockchain that has one smart contract, and it's a coin. That's it. Right? It's just got one contract that it does. And it's just that it's just that mechanism for the coin and for the mining and transfer and these types of things. And, a few little other things like hash locks and things like that. Regardless, it's just a single contract, right? Whereas these other blockchains are designed so that you can have multiple contracts and lots of other things they can do. Kind of like the difference between, say, a carburetor versus a fuel injected engine. Right? Like the difference between a Model T versus a Ferrari. So, how long are you going to hold on to your Model T until you move on to the Ferrari? That's the question. Regardless, 19,000, he's being totally parabolic. I don't agree with the idea that you can only do it with Bitcoin. That's just wrong. So let's move on.
It's not just decentralization though, right? It's like a technology coordinated decentralization that is operating. Like my mind jumps to Balaji Srinivasan's whole idea of like, these cloud-based economies, right? Or these cloud-based societies where really the decentralization is the ability to coordinate via technology across the world in a digital format.
I don't think that's it.
Okay, explain.
And Balaji is super smart, by the way. So shout out to him. He's like a walking encyclopedia. He's insane, right? But I don't think that's it, right? I think what it really is it's decentralization that makes it where nobody controls the ledger. It's all about the ledger, right? If I have a coin and I give you the coin, you have the coin. If I have the coin, I have the coin. But if we do it in an information age, we need a ledger that shows who has the coin. Now, who controls the ledger? That's the crux of the matter, right? So I think the oldest problem that mankind has had is how do I protect my property from being stolen? The
question was about an application.
A tribe, a village, a kingdom, a country. But now, if nobody can control the ledger, then nobody can steal my asset. And if I want to send it to you, nobody can stop it, block it, prevent it. So digital coordination is great. Don't get me wrong. It's going to be massive for production and things like that. And of course, when we have this globalization, we can all collaborate together and we can get more progress. That's awesome. That's great. But that doesn't prevent people from manipulating the ledger.
Yeah, I think we're saying the exact same thing, which is there's only one truly decentralized ledger today, right?
So we talked about how coordination, like digital coordination is great and all that, and yeah, I love it, but it doesn't stop people from manipulating the ledger. I don't understand how you make those connections, because truthfully, the digital coordination is one thing, but if that digital coordination is operating from a decentralized blockchain that has a decentralized ledger, then how is that digital coordination going to have any kind of manipulation on the chain? I don't get it. Maybe he has some idea, maybe he has his own ideas about how this works, but that's not how it works in practicality. I've been part of decentralized autonomous organizations of the past, decentralized autonomous communities, and every single one I worked with, there wasn't an ability to do that. We were working with a decentralized blockchain, and there wasn't that sort of manipulation that he's talking about. I believe that, again, because he's so focused on Bitcoin, he may not be aware that there's new ways of digital coordination that could happen. What if the medium of this coordination, again, is a autonomous organization? So they can't manipulate it, right? Everybody has an input on this, and that there's a consensus that has to be that maintains the security of that. So that's something that's different, and of course could have far-reaching impact in terms of how people organize, not just as companies and communities, but as entire countries even, how they're going to allocate resources, how they're going to innovate. So these types of things are happening now. These are the kinds of innovations that are happening in the blockchain space because people realize that the ability that he's talking about with being able to have a distributed ledger is just the beginning of where we can apply it to the other part that he's talking about, which is digital coordination of resources and people and being able to do things on a global scale. So, and all these things are systems that in the past have been attributed to being relegated to government. Right? Where you're like, well, the government will take care of that and they'll organize our resources. That's kind of irrelevant now. We can now use a autonomous organization to coordinate and organize our resources for the things like your roadways, your fire services, your police services. We could actually allocate the budgets ourselves, right? Using an autonomous organization. And because it's a distributed ledger, nobody can manipulate that. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be great to be living in a world where you don't have to worry about your government mucking around with the budgets the way they do every single year and they keep doing, and of course, printing more money to make up for it, that takes away your value. Wouldn't that be great? That's what's happening in the blockchain space. That's what's happening in the crypto space, but he doesn't seem to think that really is important. It's only Bitcoin, but let's keep going.
In terms of the ability to know what I have is I have, and if I send it to you, no one can stop me. Right? There's a lot that aspire to do that, claim to do it, whatever, but there's only one that is truly decentralized. When I was talking about this kind of like cloud economy or whatever, it's just now we have the ability in a digital format. If you think of Balaji's whole idea of like, there's
hold it right there, Pomp. I understand that you're a Bitcoin maxi and whatnot, but to say that Bitcoin is the only one that truly does it is just disingenuous. It's not quite right. Because the fact is that, so the only one second to Bitcoin in terms of like the size would be Ethereum, right? And a long time ago, there was the DAO. That was back in 2016. And they had an event which did change things because of a hack, right? But later on, not too long ago, there was another event where literally like hundreds of millions of dollars was lost because of some smart contract error that erased a whole bunch of value and parity. And Gavin Woods, who is like one of the founders of Ethereum, he wrote Solidity itself. There was nothing he could do to change that. That to me means that he wasn't able to turn around and be able to like retrieve those hundreds of millions of dollars. That tells me that Ethereum is pretty secure at ensuring that nobody's going to be able to change your balances, right? Aside from that, what he's referring to also is this idea that proof of work and having the biggest network in the world is what's going to prevent anyone from being able to change that. Number one, when it comes to proof of work, 51% attack. If there was ever a 51% attack to be able to get more hash power than what the current Bitcoin network has, then there could be potentially what he's talking about. It could change a balance, but that's not likely to happen just because of the sheer size of the network. Second to that, though, are proof of stake networks generally work on 2/3 rules, meaning there would have to be all the nodes that are signing blocks. You would have to have 70%, if not more, to be able to agree to those changes. And those nodes are decentralized as well. So it's this game theory of saying that, well, because they have such a huge amount of hash power and a huge amount of energy going into it, that is more secure than the decentralized nodes that aren't using a lot of power, but they're decentralized amongst many different players. You got to look at it, in the balance of view. And if you look at it, they do the same thing. It's just a little more efficient in terms of the power usage, and it's a different kind of model. It's a different kind of game theory. So I understand just talking about proof of work networks. If he's just talking about proof of networks, he's correct, because Bitcoin has the most hash, so it gives it the most security compared to, say, Bitcoin Cash or some other network that uses only mining power. Then he's right. But to compare it to all of crypto and say it's the only one, not quite. So that's my perspective. So let's hear the rest.
In the future, there's like the United States dollar, there's the Chinese, and then there's Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like one of those three ends up quote unquote winning. I think you and I both lean towards, the decentralized.
And there'll be many, right? I mean, think about the dollar took over the reserve currency of the world from the pound sterling, but that was a 40-year process. Correct. But the pound sterling is still being used today.
So hold it right there. He's talking about Balaji. So Balaji, if you know his background, he just recently wrote a book where he talks about where he thinks that all these trends are going, and he points it towards China becoming the leader in this new world. Some people have suggested that the reason that he has this whole thesis is because he's actually heavily invested in China. And so writing this book was only to help his investments and to try to solidify that whole narrative and, of course, bring more investment in and so on. Right now, though, there is actually a ton of investment that's leaving China, if you've been keeping up with the news, and they're reeling right now with their own economy, not too different from what's going on in the West. So that whole thesis isn't quite working out. The idea, though, that Pomp is talking about of like, there's the US dollar, there's the Chinese yuan. Of course, that's why Bellagio would talk about the yuan, because he wants to see that. He thinks that's going to be the dominant one. And then there's Bitcoin. Which one will it be? And they say it could be multiple. So let's see what they have to say about that.
Currencies.
Right. It's really hard to kill currency. So I believe as the world moves to become more decentralized, instead of the one reserve currency of the world,
it's hard to kill currencies.
The final
right.
moment, it's decentralized. So maybe my reserve is different. Maybe MicroStrategy's reserve is different. Maybe El Salvador's reserve is different. But other people use other things.
Different reserve currencies. So he ends off by talking about how that there won't be just one reserve currency, that there's going to be a decentralization and that different people are going to use different reserve currencies. I think that's an interesting idea. I think that's the beginning of an idea, because I personally believe that the idea of reserve currencies may be a concept that's kind of like a carryover from the way that things work now, like with fiat currencies. I think that we're going to see more of a disconnect from that whole concept, because this is the way finances used to work. If this is really so revolutionary, why are we still holding on to these old concepts about reserve currencies? Why can't it be that currencies can simply exist and be interchangeable or swappable depending on the value that they carry, and there isn't a need for a reserve? I think that could be where things are going. I think that there could be a whole new way of not looking at looking at economics in a different light than we have in the past. Because if decentralization is the real technological advancement, if this whole new thing is supposed to revolutionize everything, then it's going to revolutionize the way that we think about things too. It's going to revolutionize the way that we carry on our business. It's going to revolutionize the way we go about life, right? I personally believe, and what we're doing with Peer Plays, is that more and more technology is going to become a companion to allow us to be able to take the value that we have in everything and be able to, through microtransactions, capture that value and then be able to facilitate that for being able to live, dream, and grow in whatever enterprise we may want to go towards. So that means that I could get to a point where if I capture enough value, that there could be a tokenization, if not a value, which I'm able to transact with others without them even needing to, sit there and do this whole game that we do in the crypto space, where it's like, well, what's the value of this token? Well, it's got these fundamentals and yada, yada, yada. And all this old stuff comes mixed in. Like, we've got all these old ideas that just mix into this new thing. And we end up with things like Celsius, and we end up with things like Three Arrows, and we end up with things like Luna, that are these old centralized mechanics that have no place in the new world. And we see how quickly they fail under these conditions. So I think that what he's talking about with Bitcoin being superior to crypto, it really is a maxi kind of a position, but the truth is that there's tons of innovation going on. I think we need to consider the fact that if this is as innovative as we believe it is, we need to innovate the way we think about things. The way we think about things is going to change. And the faster we're able to change that mindset, the faster we're able to catch that wave. And when we do that, that's where opportunity exists. You all know you want to get in on things earlier rather than later. You want to be at the beginning of the S-curve, not the end. So it's important for us to keep in mind that regardless of whether you're going to be, it's all about crypto and you're going to disregard, it's all about Bitcoin and you're going to discard crypto, then you got to keep in mind that if it's innovative, then it's going to change. And it's going to change the way that people judge what is what. So right now, if it's all about old world investment, Bitcoin. If it's all about a new world that is really going to be innovated by this new technology, then you're going to have to look at crypto. You can't ignore it.